Oh boy, we have a pretty busy episode here. Talladega TV ratings have been revealed, and they're more interesting than you might think. There's some Gen 7 drama potentially, and then we have to talk about Kyle Larson's dramatic flip at the end of Sunday's race. There could be some potential fallout from that, so we have a ton to talk about. I can't wait to get started, guys. How's it going, everyone? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Hope your weeks are off to a good start. I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, shoot, Talladega on Sunday was such a good race. It's been super refreshing the last couple days to just go through my Twitter feed, to go through, my YouTube comment section, just see 95, 98% positive comments from NASCAR fans. People love the race this last week, and it's super refreshing to see that this week, so I've had a good couple of days. But we do have some interesting things today. I don't want to kill the vibe too much, but there is some dramatic stuff we have to talk about around the NASCAR world today. So let's get started. We'll start with some TV ratings and attendance figures, because those have now been released from this past weekend. Fox earned a 2.8 overnight TV rating for Sunday's Geico 500, which is the same rating they received for this race last year. Last spring's Talladega race also received a 2.8, so TV ratings flat, which I'm not disappointed by, but I'm a tiny bit disappointed to see that ratings didn't go up for this race, given how entertaining I thought this race was. If I take a step back, it's very different this year how I'm disappointed to not see TV ratings go up for a NASCAR race, whereas last year, ratings went down pretty much every week, and so I was just happy if ratings were only down a couple percent. This year now, the fact that ratings didn't go up, I'm a little disappointed by, because we've already seen a few races this year where TV ratings have actually gone up this year compared to last year. So for Talladega, which I thought was the best race we've seen this year, I think a lot of fans would say was maybe the best, most entertaining race we've seen this year. For ratings not to go up for this one, definitely a little bit disappointing, but flat from last year. You can't really say it's a loss. It's still not too bad. Like I've said before, I think last year was NASCAR's rock bottom for this modern era, so to speak. Junior left, all the superstars had really left at that point. The sport was really at its worst last season. Fans were confused and concerned about the future of the sport. I think last year was really rough. I think 2019, we've started to see a small turn towards, upward trend again. It's still early, but I do still feel pretty good about what we've seen this year on the TV ratings front. Now, NASCAR doesn't release official attendance figures for races. They haven't done that for several years now, but we do have an estimation from people who study this type of thing. Talladega Superspeedway saw an estimated 190,000 fans attend, all the racing this past weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. ARCA race, Xfinity race, Cup race, all that type of stuff. Roughly 190,000 people were in attendance for those races combined, which apparently is up slightly from last year. So good news for Talladega there. And it's only going to get better, I think, for them, because they're obviously investing a ton, renovating the infield and everything. So by this next fall, track could be really nice. Talladega set themselves up pretty nicely going forward. For Sunday's Cup race, the main event, they estimate roughly 80 to 90,000 people were in attendance for that race. The grandstands, I believe, seat about 80,000, and most people were saying they were probably 90% full Sunday. So pretty good crowd, not a sellout, but a sizable crowd. Basically double that we saw, or more than double what we saw at Bristol a few weeks ago. So that's good to see. Now, where the TV rating stuff does get kind of interesting, and I'll talk about this for a moment, as far as individual markets go, individual cities, individual towns in the United States, the number one market for Sunday's Talladega Cup race was in Birmingham, Alabama, which, for those of you who don't know, is, not too far from the racetrack. I think it's maybe an hour, maybe less than an hour drive from Talladega. Now, theoretically, you'd think that the town that the race itself is located in, you'd think that their TV ratings would go down that weekend, because most of the people there would be at the racetrack watching it in person, not watching on TV. That doesn't seem to be the case, and we've seen this more than once this season on the NASCAR side. In fact, a couple weeks ago, when the race was in Richmond, the number one TV market for that race was Richmond, Virginia. So this is kind of an interesting trend. I think it does say some things about the culture of sports fans these days, and just sports in general, live sports and whatnot. But I also think some people have kind of blown this a little out of proportion, in my opinion. What I think this says more than anything, TV coverage with HD coverage with multiple camera angles, like what I do when I watch the races. I have, obviously the Fox or NBC broadcast on my main TV. I usually have my laptop there where I can go to NASCAR.com and watch live video feeds from there. Sometimes I'll have the radio broadcast playing as well. I have multiple screens set up, multiple different platforms to watch the race from all different angles. I have like a full race viewing experience. So with that kind of technology, in a lot of people's households, at their homes, live attendance across all major sports, this isn't just a NASCAR thing, has kind of dipped in recent years, because you can sit at home and watch the game, the race on an 80-inch HD television, and that's just kind of common now. So what I think this says is, the fact that ticket prices for a lot of NASCAR races haven't really gone down in price that much. I think some fans, just maybe even in the local area, just say, I'll sit this one out. I'll watch it at home. That's happening in a lot of sports. I don't think NASCAR is definitely not the only one this is happening to. Now, what I've seen is some NASCAR fans, and this is just fans, I haven't seen anyone affiliated with NASCAR talk about this at all, but some fans are suggesting or thinking about the possibility that NASCAR could start blacking out certain areas when the race is in their town. In other words, for example, when NASCAR goes to Chicagoland, for that race, people who live in and near Chicago would not be able to watch that race live on TV. In theory, this would encourage fans in the local area to go attend the race in person. In theory. Anyway, I've seen some NASCAR fans suggest that maybe NASCAR could end up going down this route. I don't think I've heard any fans, suggest that they'd be in favor of this happening, but I think some fans have at least raised the idea that maybe this is something NASCAR's thinking about. It's not completely unheard of in American motorsports for something like this to happen. I'm not too familiar with it, but I know IndyCar has, in the past blacked out the Indianapolis 500 for people watching in the Indianapolis area. So people who live in Indianapolis can't watch the Indy 500 live on TV because it's blacked out. That's something that IndyCar has done in the past. I think they did it last year. I don't know if it's still a problem. I think they only do it for the Indy 500, but I know that it is something that has happened. So the fact that it happens, in IndyCar, I guess is why some NASCAR fans talk about it possibly happening in NASCAR. I'm definitely not a fan of this idea. I mean, just looking at the specific example of Talladega. If you blacked out the race, in Birmingham, if people in Birmingham couldn't watch the race this last Sunday, even if all those people who wanted to watch the race in Birmingham tried to come to the racetrack to attend it in person, even if all of them decided to pay the money to watch it in person, I mean, like I said, Talladega was already like 90% full. They couldn't have fit all those fans in the grandstands for this weekend's race. So I don't think it really makes that much sense, and I think all you would really be doing is pissing off an already somewhat disenfranchised fan base if you start blacking out races in local markets whenever the race is in their town. It would be a bad idea for NASCAR. I don't think they're going to do it. Again, this is just something that some fans have suggested. It's something interesting because we have seen it a couple times now where the top TV market is also the same town that the race is located in. It's kind of weird. We'll see. It'd be interesting to see if that continues to trend that direction the rest of this season, but just something I thought we could talk about. Put it on y'all's minds maybe. Anyway, now I want to talk about some juicier reports. This kind of came out of nowhere, but it was reported yesterday that teams are apparently asking NASCAR to help pay for a lot of the Gen 7 upgrades. Now, obviously, we've talked about this a lot. I know Roger Penske reiterated earlier this month that the focus of the Gen 7 needs to be on cutting costs for race teams. But according to this tweet from Adam Stern over at Sports Business Daily, NASCAR teams are asking the sanctioning body and the tracks to help pay some of the bill that's going to come with getting new parts and everything for the Generation 7 car that's supposed to debut in about a year and a half. And yeah, as you can see from Stern's tweet here, this is an unusual move that definitely suggests that a lot of race teams feel that NASCAR's current, distribution model, the way they share revenue and distribute revenue, it's out of balance, it's out of whack, it's not working right. We've heard this before, but it's interesting to hear the teams talk about it, especially when it comes to footing the bill for the Generation 7 race car. I've seen reports that say switching to the Gen 7 is going to cost race teams tens of millions of dollars, among all of them. And this is because teams not only will be building and buying new components for a Gen 7 car, but a lot of the stuff they already have from these past generations are basically going to be worthless at this point. They're virtually going to be obsolete. So I want to give some more important background information because this is kind of crazy news to hear NASCAR teams literally asking NASCAR, the company, to help them pay for new parts. Now, NASCAR brings in roughly $800 million, it varies, but roughly $800 million every single year thanks to the multi-billion-dollar TV deals they've signed with Fox and NBC. And remember, that deal runs through 2025. Now, of that $800 million annually, the teams, the race teams, like Joe Gibbs Racing, Team Penske, Stewart Haas, all them, receive, combined, they receive 25% of that TV money. The racetracks, one's owned by IC, one's owned by SMI, ones that are independently owned, they receive 65% of that money, and then the remaining 10% sticks with NASCAR for like administrative purposes. 2/3 of that $800 million is going to the racetracks. Combined, only a quarter of it that's actually going towards the race teams. That is, I think, what the teams mean when they say that this is out of balance. I'm not saying that the teams should be making more money than the tracks. I think that'd be quite drastic, but definitely it feels like there's room to adjust. And part of the reason I say that is because both SMI and ISC, the two companies that own most of the tracks on the NASCAR schedule, have released their financial reports from 2018 recently. And in both companies' cases, I found this very interesting. They reported that they actually earned more revenue in 2018 than in 2017, more total revenue. However, their actual ticket sales were down from 2018 compared to 2017. So they were making less money last year in ticket sales. They were selling less tickets, less attendance, but they were still making more money overall. That seems a little... it doesn't make sense to me. The biggest problem I see here is if the tracks are making most of their money off of this TV contract, it takes away their incentive to try and sell the experience to the fans. If ticket sales don't matter that much to these racetracks, why would they bother trying to enhance the experience? Now, some tracks recently have started investing more in the fan experience, likely, in my opinion, because they know in a few years, in 2025, when the new TV contracts are being negotiated, the tracks know that they're probably going to start receiving a lesser share of the overall revenue. So I think tracks know that they're going to be a little more dependent on, or a little more reliant, I guess, on ticket sales. So like you see Talladega is investing to make a better infield experience, ISM Raceway just completely renovated, tons of tracks are doing things like that nowadays, and I think it's because they know in a few years they're going to really need to attract fans to their racetrack. They're not going to be able to just rely on the massive amount of money Fox and NBC are giving them. And that's a good thing now, but for many years leading up to this, we didn't see much of that, and I think it's because a lot of tracks were complacent. They didn't really care. They honestly just didn't care that much about the fan. They cared more about the money they're getting from Fox and NBC. So, that was primary, fan experience was secondary. That seems to be shifting now, but I think that only needs to continue shifting going forward if we want NASCAR fans to keep flocking to the sport. Denny Hamlin was, I think, the first person I remember to really call attention to this, and it was back in 2017. So I think it's interesting to see how this conversation has progressed to now, race teams are more comfortable calling this out and saying we need, a higher percentage of the TV money. It's not fair the way it's distributed currently. So I do think it's interesting to see how that has progressed over the last couple of years. We'll see where it goes from here, but very interesting in my opinion. I don't know about you guys, but in my opinion, this is very interesting. Well, that was all fun. Last thing I want to talk about a little bit is Steve O'Donnell, NASCAR Vice President of Competition, guy who's talking all about aero packages and stuff on a week-to-week basis. He had some comments about Kyle Larson's late race flip. On the last lap of Sunday's race, Kyle Larson spun towards the inside wall, actually got airborne, which we don't see Gen 6 cars, take off like that very often. Got airborne, obviously flipped multiple times. Kyle Larson was okay, thankfully. Nobody was injured in that wreck, but definitely one that opened a lot of fans' eyes, I think shocked a lot of fans, and it sounds like NASCAR is definitely going to talk about that going forward. In the last decade or two, when cars get airborne like that, NASCAR often goes to the drawing board and talks about how maybe they could make some changes to the car to prevent that going forward. Now, the reason that we'll be talking about this right now is because I think most fans agree that the aero package with the 9-inch spoiler, the wicker bills on the ends, all that type of stuff, the package we saw at Talladega this last weekend produced some of the best super speedway racing we've seen in decades. So I think a lot of fans really don't want NASCAR to touch the package. But with that flip happening at the end of this race, it sounds like NASCAR might start putting their hands on it anyways. Here's what Steve O'Donnell said regarding Kyle Larson's flip and any potential action NASCAR might take going forward. He said, we'll have to look at a couple of things. The initial impact of the car on the side around the right rear, maybe that contributed to the air getting under the tire there as it headed toward the wall. We'll look at all that. We'll certainly make any adjustments we need to. We obviously want to keep the cars on the ground, but on the good news front, glad to see Kyle was all right. Talked to him after the race, and he was certainly shaken up from the wild ride, but he was in a good spot. So that's what I mean. NASCAR is going to look at the aero package. They're probably going to make a small adjustment, whether it's trying to slow the cars down even more, whether it's who knows. And the only reason this is concerning and kind of disappointing to me, I'm all for driver safety, but the package, the racing, the closing rates, the bump drafting, everything we saw Sunday as far as the racing was concerned was virtually perfect in my opinion for a super speedway race. I'd hate to see NASCAR go in and make any major adjustments just because of this one, in my opinion, kind of a freak incident. It doesn't matter what you do to these cars. If they get hit just the right way, they'll flip anyways. We saw Kenseth flipped at Talladega a couple of years, hit the inside wall, kind of like Larson did. His flip wasn't quite as violent, but we saw Kenseth get airborne. We saw, Chris Buescher a couple of years back get airborne at Talladega, not because the air lifted the car off the ground so much, but these cars still find a way to get airborne and flip sometimes, and you just can't prevent that in every case. Obviously, it's good that NASCAR has made the improvements they've made in the past with the roof flaps and whatnot to help keep the cars mostly on the ground, but you still can't prevent all of it. And, like I said, I don't want to see drivers go flying into catch fences. I don't want to see these cars, I don't want to see these drivers in any major danger like that. And I know Kyle Larson, that could have been a bad wreck. That could have been a very bad wreck, and I'm glad that it wasn't. I just really would hate to see NASCAR make any major changes to this otherwise pretty much perfect restrictor or super speedway package just to try and prevent cars getting airborne. I hope I'm making sense. When NASCAR introduced the car of tomorrow, in the late 2000s, it wasn't because it would produce better racing, it was for safety. And while there were some amazing safety improvements that I think most all fans can appreciate and are happy about, the racing suffered. It really did. Now, if there's a way we can make safety improvements and make the racing better, great, that's perfect. But I really don't want to sacrifice too much racing for safety. These cars are the safest they've ever been. These NASCAR stock cars have never been safer. So, I don't know. I don't want to completely kill the racing just to make the cars 0.25% safer. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's just me speaking from a fan who's never going to get behind the wheel of one of these things and go 200 miles an hour. So maybe I'm completely out of line, but, NASCAR is supposed to be a little dangerous. And I think no matter what you do to these cars, there's still a chance they'll flip over and go into the catch fence or who knows where. It doesn't matter what you do to these cars, there's still that possibility. And we've seen that happen. Like I said, Kyle Larson, the fact that the air kind of lifted it off the ground, that's what got him, upside down. But like I just said, Kenseth in 2016, he got hit by another car. That's what sent him upside down. Or Buescher in 2016, he got hit by a car. That's what sent him upside down. Most flips these days are because cars are hitting them in weird places. And that's not the aero package. Nothing you can really do to prevent that. So that's all I'll say there. I don't know. Maybe you guys have different opinions there. I just love the racing we saw at Talladega this weekend, and I'd hate to see them ruin it because of one little thing like this. Anyway, you guys, that's my show. I had a lot to talk about, goodness me. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram, I always say or. Follow me on both, please, I guess. Continue the conversation over there. Yeah, of course, you can check out the description down there and get yourself an Out of the Groove t-shirt if you want to support me, represent the show. I really appreciate that. And then, of course, a big, big thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. Shout out Michael Harrison at Givas of the Stars, SelfishGifts.com, Mentally Defective, Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason R. Long, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, Ross Corlett, TheRacingInsiders.com, and the rest of these amazing Patreon supporters. Thank you all so much for continuing to help me do what I do, help this show grow. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Should have another episode up towards the end of this week, and then of course I'll have some more videos after the race this weekend. I really appreciate the support, guys. I've had a great time doing this show the last few days, and especially with how great of a race Talladega ended up being. I've had a great time just being on social media the last couple days. Not often you can say that about social media. A lot of trolls on there. Don't know if you guys realize that. a lot of nasty people on social media, but it's been fun the last couple days. So hopefully the good times can continue. Hopefully this weekend's race is great as well. And yeah, I guess that's all I got. Thank you everyone for watching. See you guys again very, very soon. Bye-bye, everyone.